this, hold on. If they find a dead body in me and your car, and this is our car, do you think they'll let me and you stay out like long? They got out. So think about this. Yeah.
What you think about that?
He didn't do it.
Fuck out of here. All the evidence that's out there.
When the news about the music star David first hit the internet, it completely took over. Everyone was talking about it. The story was scary and confusing. The police had found a body, a dead person, that had been cut up. And this horrible discovery was made inside a car, a Tesla, that was registered to David. As soon as people heard about it, the whole world just went crazy. It felt like everyone made up their mind in 1 second. All the news channels on TV and the big websites were quickly saying that David was definitely the one who did it. They were treating him like he was already guilty. At the same time, the internet blew up. On all the social media apps, people were sharing the story and making their own guesses about what happened. They were posting thousands and thousands of comments, all saying that David must be a bad person. It wasn't just people either. The companies that David had worked with, the brands that used to support him, they all got scared. They immediately started to drop him. They didn't want their name connected to someone involved in something so dark. It seemed like every single person in the entire world was convinced that this case was simple. They thought the police had caught the right guy and that there was no other way to look at it. It felt like David had no one on his side. Well, almost no one. Because one person, a man named Charleston White, saw what was happening and he did not agree. While the entire internet was screaming that David was guilty, Charleston White decided to stand up and speak for him.
White. So think about this. If they got all this information on him dating a minor, an underage kid, and she looked like a white girl, mixed girl, what they let just stay free like this?
Charleston White is a guy who is famous for saying exactly what he thinks. He doesn't really use a filter, and he's not afraid to be loud and direct with his opinions. So when he decided to speak up about David's case, he didn't hold back at all. He jumped into the conversation with full force and made a very big declaration. He said that David was innocent, but he didn't just say the words. He also claimed that he had some kind of proof, some information that could change the whole story. He said what he knew could turn everything people believed completely upside down. The main thing he talked about, though, was a bigger idea that really made people stop and think. He pointed out something that happens in America all the time. He said that every single day, young black men get arrested by the police for very, very small things. Sometimes the evidence against them isn't even strong. He used this idea to ask a powerful question about David's situation. He argued that if the police truly had solid, undeniable proof that David had done this horrible crime, then David would already be in a jail cell. There would be no question about it. He wouldn't be out and about. He'd be locked up. Charleston was basically reminding everyone of a sad truth. He said that the police system doesn't usually wait or hesitate when it wants to arrest a young black man. They often do it quickly, even when the evidence is as small as a few crumbs. So, for David to not be arrested yet, to Charleston, that was a major sign that the police's case might not be as strong as everyone assumed.
So you mean to tell me OJ was found with a bloody glove, he was arrested immediately? Immediately, with all the circumstantial evidence they found on OJ, they placed it. So you mean to tell me they got all of this on this and he still get to move freely amongst America?
For Charleston White, the whole situation was pretty simple to figure out. He looked at the main fact that everyone could see. David was still a free man. He wasn't in handcuffs. He wasn't sitting in a jail cell. To Charleston, that one fact meant everything. It meant that the police didn't actually have a real case against him. If they had something solid, they would have taken him in already. He even brought up another famous case from a long time ago, the O.J. Simpson trial, to show how weird this was. He said that this whole thing with David just didn't make any logical sense. He asked a question that a lot of people were thinking. If someone was really murdered and then their body was hidden inside a famous person's car, how is it possible that no one has been arrested? It seemed like such a serious and crazy crime, so the fact that nothing was happening felt off to him. He told everyone that the story the public was hearing had holes in it. The pieces of the puzzle just weren't fitting together. But Charleston wasn't finished. He decided to dive into all the wild rumors that were spreading online. People were talking about a different tragic event, about a teenage girl who had died, which had already shocked everyone on the internet. Now, rumors were flying that David had somehow been involved with that girl. Fans were acting like detectives, posting what they thought was proof all over social media. They were pointing out tattoos that they thought matched, they were sharing photos that were supposedly leaked, and they were even digging through David's own song lyrics. They were saying that the words in his songs were like secret confessions to what he had done. The internet was filled with this kind of talk, and everyone was guessing and speculating. But Charleston looked at all of this evidence and called it out. He said it was all just too perfect, too packaged. It felt like people were trying too hard to make all these random things connect to David, and he wasn't buying it.
Neat. So I'm saying, let me think outside the box. Maybe his mama done it. Maybe her mama done it and set him up. Maybe one of them racist uncles or cousins don't like her. Maybe the other boyfriend done it. Maybe the pimp who was sex trafficking her for the last year when she ran away done it.
Charleston White kept explaining his thoughts to everyone listening. He said that all the rumors and so-called evidence people were sharing online looked way too clean and organized. It all seemed a little too perfect, like it was a story that had been carefully put together instead of something that had actually happened. He started to believe that this whole situation was a setup. He thought someone had created a fake story on purpose to ruin a young black artist's life, and they were doing it right at the very moment his music career was becoming a huge success. He also talked about the crime itself, which was a very violent and horrible act. He said that the way it was done showed that the person responsible was someone who knew what they were doing. It seemed planned out and deliberate, done by someone with a lot of experience in dark things. Charleston said he just didn't believe that a 20-year-old musician, like David, would have the ability or the knowledge to pull off something so complex and brutal. He asked everyone who was watching him to just stop and really think about it for a minute. He repeated his main point over and over. If the police truly believed David was the one who did this, he would already be in jail. There was no way he would still be walking around free. When Charleston said all of this online, it was like a bomb went off on the internet. It caused a massive reaction and split people into two very different groups. One half of the people online were absolutely furious with him. They yelled that he was defending a person who should not be defended. They said how could he support a man whose own car was connected to the death of a teenage girl. They thought Charleston was on the wrong side of something very terrible. But the other half of people who heard him started to feel doubt. They began to wonder if maybe Charleston had a point. They replayed his video and thought about his words. They realized how strange it was that with such a serious crime, there were no official arrests. There were no pictures of David in a mugshot, and no dates for a court trial had been set. All that really existed were a lot of rumors flying around the internet. Charleston was very good at understanding how people think online. He saw that people were getting confused and starting to question things, and he knew exactly how to use that confusion to build support and keep his message spreading to more and more people.
David.
There's nothing else put him in jail just to put a hold on him.
A dead body found in your car?
Listen, hold on. If they find a dead body in me and your car, and this is our car, do you think they'll let me and you stay out like long?
Charleston White didn't back down after his first video. In fact, he started talking about it even more. He went live on social media over and over again, having long conversations where he kept repeating his most important idea. He wanted to make sure everyone understood what he believed. He explained that the silence from the police and the investigators was not a sign that David was guilty. Instead, he said it was proof that the justice system had nothing real to hold against him. He kept using the same powerful phrase, telling his viewers, if it was really him, they'd have snatched him already. He said this again and again, drilling the message into people's heads that the lack of an arrest was the biggest clue of all. Then, he did the thing that Charleston White is famous for. He started to stir up controversy and get people talking in a way that almost no one else can. He wasn't afraid to say things that would make people angry or start a big argument. At one point, he completely flipped the story around. He started talking about the situation from a different angle, and he did it so forcefully that it shocked a lot of people. His critics and people who were already angry with him began accusing him of being disrespectful and insensitive toward the victim, the girl who had died. He used some very harsh and strong language that sparked a new wave of outrage online. People were furious, saying that instead of questioning the case against David, he was now somehow blaming the girl for what had happened. This created a whole new firestorm, with everyone arguing not just about David, but now about Charleston White and the things he had chosen to say.
Why would they let him walk this freely, only to lose endorsements and sponsorships and cancel shows and not his freedom? In the climate that we're in.
While a lot of people were getting mad at Charleston White, the people who supported him saw things differently. They argued that he wasn't trying to be disrespectful or excuse a terrible crime. Instead, they said he was trying to force everyone to think more deeply about the situation. He wanted people to stop and question why they were so quick to believe a story that only showed one side. He was pushing them to look at the bigger picture. For Charleston, questioning the police and the justice system wasn't about being rude to the victim. To him, it was about something much more basic: survival. He explained that in his experience, this is just how you have to live when you're a young black man in America. You have to question everything because the system often doesn't treat you fairly. He kept repeating one line that really stuck with people. He said, "They don't let young black men walk free after something like this. Not in America." That one powerful sentence started to spread everywhere. It got shared all over TikTok, on X, which used to be Twitter, and all through the comments on YouTube. It became the central idea, the main heartbeat, of his entire defense for David. As time went on, and the police continued to stay quiet and not make any announcements, Charleston's theory started to seem stronger and stronger to many people. Every single day that passed without an arrest being made became another piece of evidence for his argument. He would point at the calendar and say, "Look, another day and he's still free." What does that tell you? It's important to know that Charleston was never saying the overall situation wasn't a terrible tragedy. He always acknowledged that someone had died and that it was awful. What he was saying was that the details of the story just didn't seem to fit together in a way that made sense. He asked a simple but confusing question. If the car was really connected to David and a body was really found in it, and all these rumors about his connection to the girl were real, then why was David still out in the world? How could he still be walking around, free to do his music shows and live his life, if the police had such a strong case against him? That was the puzzle he kept pointing to. Charleston White took that one confusing idea, that David was free, and he turned it into a whole movement. His fans started to get behind him, using hashtags like #FreeDavid and #CharlestonSaidIt on all their social media posts. Suddenly, this wasn't just a story about a crime anymore. It turned into a kind of cultural war where everyone had to pick a side. The internet completely split into two groups. One group saw Charleston as a brave truth-teller who wasn't afraid to ask the hard questions. The other group saw him as a reckless troll who was just causing trouble and getting in the way of justice. As this argument grew bigger and bigger, the story exploded. It went from being a serious topic you might hear about in a courtroom to becoming viral content that everyone was talking about. All over the internet, people started acting like detectives. On TikTok, users would look at David's music videos, going through them frame by frame, claiming they found hidden clues about what happened. On YouTube, people made long videos breaking down the words to his songs, saying that the lyrics were like a secret confession. But Charleston wasn't interested in analyzing music videos or song lyrics. He was focused on one thing: logic. He kept saying that if the police had any real, solid evidence, David would be sitting in a jail cell right that very minute. He wouldn't be out there performing at concerts and living his life. That simple, logical argument started to make sense to a lot of people. It hit different, as people say. It made them stop and think. The more Charleston talked, the more his theory started to sound like it could possibly be true. He started talking about David's situation as something much bigger than just one case. He said it was like a mirror showing America's double standards. He reminded everyone that when it comes to black men, people often assume they are guilty long before any real proof is ever shown. But now, in this situation, it felt like the exact opposite was happening. It felt like someone wanted the whole world to believe David was guilty, but no one was actually doing the work to prove it in a real court of law. Charleston turned that feeling into his main point. He said, "The fact that they are hesitating and not arresting him shows that they don't have a case against him." By this point, Charleston wasn't just another person with a loud opinion on the internet. He had become a major part of the story itself. His defense of David turned into a viral movement that was so big it started making its own headlines. The same news outlets that used to ignore him now had to talk about him. They debated on TV whether he was helping the situation or making it worse. But no matter what they said, his voice had become too loud to ignore. Charleston White had done it again. He had taken a huge controversy and turned it into a spotlight on himself and his ideas. He had flipped public opinion upside down using nothing but his own words, his logic, and his fiery personality. To really understand why Charleston White's words had such a big impact, you have to know a little about who he is. Because this man isn't just some random loudmouth on the internet. His own life is full of contradictions. He is a man who has lived through chaos, pain, and a little bit of fame, and he has somehow turned all of that into his own personal brand. Charleston was born in 1977 in Texas. His life took a very dark turn when he was very young. When he was only 14 years old, he was involved in a fight outside a Foot Locker store that turned deadly. This tragedy was something that would follow him for the rest of his life. Because the crime was so serious, he was tried in court as an adult and was found guilty. He spent years of his life in prison before being released when he was 21 years old. That moment from his childhood defined him forever in the public's eyes. To some people, he was just a criminal who had no right to speak about justice. But to other people, he was a man who had actually lived through the things that most people only talk about. After he got out of prison, Charleston tried to start over and become a new person. He began working in his community, talking to kids, and warning them about the dangers of gang life. He even created an organization called HOP, which stands for Hypocrisy Over Politics Incorporated, to try and stop violence among young people. For a little while, it looked like he might have truly changed and was on a quiet path to redeeming himself. But Charleston was never the kind of person who was built for a quiet life. He didn't want to be someone who changed and then stayed silent. He wanted to make noise, shake up the room, and call out everyone he thought was being fake or a hypocrite. By the time the 2020s came around, he had built a reputation for himself as one of the most unapologetic and unfiltered voices online. He would say the things that other people were too scared to even whisper, and he absolutely did not care who he made angry. He started calling out famous rappers, celebrities, and politicians one by one. He went after big names like T.I., Boozy Badass, and Soulja Boy, accusing them of promoting a life of crime in their music while pretending to be good role models in public. He didn't just criticize them lightly. He would often humiliate them. He would attack their families, their parenting skills, and their reputations. And every single time he did this, the internet would go crazy. Clips of Charleston roasting a rapper or making jokes about serious tragedies would go viral in just a few hours. People loved to hate him, but they also couldn't stop watching him. That's the crazy part. Even the people who hated him were helping to make him more famous. He would sometimes get banned from a social media platform, but he would always come back, and his audience would be even bigger than before. To his supporters, he was just keeping it real. To his critics, he was just a clout chaser who would say anything shocking just to get attention and go viral. One of his wildest moments happened during a live stream with another popular streamer named Aiden Ross. Right there on camera, Charleston pepper sprayed one of Aiden's friends. The chaos that followed was pure internet entertainment. There were talks of lawsuits, people making threats, memes everywhere, and clips of the incident spread all over the internet. That single moment summed him up perfectly. He was unpredictable, controversial, and completely impossible to ignore. Then there was another viral clip where he was at a comedy show. Instead of telling jokes, he flashed stacks of cash and started taunting people in the audience who were heckling him, instead of trying to calm the situation down. It didn't matter if you agreed with what he was saying or not, you were going to watch because he had a way of making every single moment feel like a major headline. Charleston's whole brand is built on contradiction. One minute, he might be talking very seriously about saving kids from the dangers of the streets. The next minute, he might be mocking rappers who died from the very same street violence he claims to want to stop. He laughed about the death of a rapper named King Von. He made jokes about the murder of another rapper, Takeoff. He even mocked the death of a white conservative commentator named Charlie Kirk, calling it white-on-white crime and laughing about it. For most people, that kind of behavior would ruin their career forever. But for Charleston, it only seemed to make him more powerful. Every new scandal was like free advertising for him. Every feud he started brought him new viewers, and he knew exactly how to keep everyone's attention focused on him. So, when he suddenly decided to turn his spotlight onto David's case, it wasn't just random commentary. It was a full-on collision between his love for controversy and a real-life tragedy. People didn't know whether they should take him seriously this time, or if it was just another one of his attention-seeking antics. But this time, Charleston sounded different. He sounded less like a troll trying to make people angry, and more like a man who was on a serious mission. He talked about the justice system, its biases, and how fast America is to turn against young black men. He wasn't just defending David. In a way, he was reliving his own story through David. To Charleston, this case wasn't about music or fame. It was about survival, finding the truth, and fighting against how society is so quick to judge people who look like him. That personal connection is what made his defense hit so much deeper than anyone expected. Charleston's entire life had been built around one main theme: the system does not forgive. He had been that 14-year-old kid who lost everything, who was locked up before he even got a real chance to grow up. He spent years being judged by a system that, he felt, never saw him as a human being. So, when he saw David, another young black man facing a nightmare of accusations without even being arrested, it triggered something deep inside him. He said, "They don't let brothers walk free after something like this, not in America." And people believed him because he was speaking from his own hard-lived experience, not from a theory in a book. Charleston's own history made his words both dangerous and powerful at the same time. He wasn't just quoting laws or reading from case files. He was talking from a place of having lived it. When Charleston White spoke about David's case, he didn't sound like a lawyer or a news reporter. He sounded like someone who had personally felt the heat and pressure of the justice system. That raw, real emotion in his voice made people listen, even when they really didn't want to hear what he had to say. His opinion on the case wasn't smooth or careful. It was messy, unfiltered, and soaked in the story of his own difficult life. That honesty is why his defense of David spread so quickly, like a wildfire moving across the internet. Fans who had barely heard of Charleston before started repeating his favorite lines word for word. Hashtags like #Charleston said it and #Justice for David flooded everyone's social media feeds. Even people who completely disagreed with him couldn't ignore the way his message had taken over the entire online conversation. At the same time, Charleston kept adding more fuel to the fire. In every interview, every live stream, and every post, he would twist the knife a little deeper. If David was guilty, he'd already be behind bars, he said, over and over, until it started to sound like an undeniable fact to his followers. He described the whole situation as a setup where a young music star was rising too fast and someone powerful was trying to destroy him before he reached his peak. That idea hooked people instantly. Fans started making their own videos about this possible setup, comparing it to other music industry conspiracies and famous celebrity scandals that were never solved. Charleston had, all by himself, turned a murder case into a huge cultural storm, and he knew it. The funny part is that the man everyone accused of just chasing fame and attention might have actually been telling some truth this time. Charleston White, the same guy who made fun of rappers and started fights for fun, had tapped into something real that people were feeling: a growing distrust of the police and the courts, and a sense that people are too quick to judge someone before all the facts are clear. That's why when he spoke about David, it didn't feel like just another one of his crazy rants. It felt like an important statement. Whether people agreed with him or not, they were listening. And that's the kind of power Charleston White had built for himself, the kind that can make the whole world pause and pay attention with just a few words. After Charleston White's wild defense of David took over the internet, the case itself twisted into something nobody saw coming. The deeper the police investigators dug into the facts, the more confusing the story became, and the louder Charleston's voice seemed to get. The authorities confirmed the one fact that everyone was dreading: the body found in David's Tesla was indeed the missing 15-year-old girl. This news shocked the world all over again. The details were horrible. The girl's body had been cut up and hidden in the trunk of a car, as if someone wanted to make sure it would never be found. On paper, with a fact that terrible, it looked like the simplest case ever. Yet, the strangest part of it all remained. There was still no arrest. That line, "No arrests have been made at this time," became the phrase that news reporters had to repeat every single day. It was like a ghost haunting all the news headlines. Meanwhile, social media turned into a virtual courtroom. Amateur detectives on TikTok were picking apart every lyric David had ever written, searching for secret clues in his songs like Romantic Homicide. Fans posted wild theories, saying his music videos held hidden messages about the victim. YouTubers made long videos analyzing his videos frame by frame, and the website Reddit turned into a giant digital detective board filled with crazy speculation. But through all the noise and all the rumors, no hard evidence was ever released to the public. There was no DNA match, no clear witness, and no camera footage that proved anything. It was all just talk, all rumor, and all confusion. And that's exactly the kind of environment where Charleston White thrived. Every delay from the police became another piece of proof for his argument. Every no comment from law enforcement became more fuel for his fire. He said the system was stalling because it had nothing solid to connect David to the crime. To him, the silence from the investigators wasn't them being careful, it was a cover-up. Charleston's take on the situation spread like wildfire once again, flooding sites like X, TikTok, and YouTube. He claimed that powerful people didn't want the real truth to come out, and that David was being framed to take the blame for something much bigger. And believe it or not, people listened. Hashtags like #FreeDavid and #CharlestonWasRight started trending everywhere. His theory went from being a controversial idea to a mainstream belief in just a few weeks. Suddenly, news anchors on national television were talking about him and his ideas. That's the crazy part. Charleston White, a man with no law degree, no police badge, and no legal authority, had the entire media world reacting to his theory. Some journalists called him reckless for declaring David innocent without all the facts. Others had to admit that he was making some valid points about race, bias, and how quickly the system usually acts when the suspect is a young black man. No matter which side people were on, one fact was undeniable. Charleston had hijacked the story. The real investigators were staying quiet, but Charleston was out there every single day, shaping what the public thought with his wild logic and unfiltered delivery. Meanwhile, David's own world was in total chaos. The scandal froze his career right in midair. Companies that had partnerships with him pulled back, record labels hesitated to put out his music, and tour promoters didn't know what to do. They were scared that one wrong move would make them look like they were supporting a killer. But they were also worried that if they dropped him too fast, they might be abandoning an innocent man. Charleston's defense gave David's fans a reason to keep believing in him. They held on to Charleston's words, using them as ammunition against the media. "He'd be locked up already if he did it," became their anthem. That single phrase echoed across the internet louder than any song David had ever released. But not everyone was celebrating. The victim's family and activists were furious with Charleston online, saying he was disrespecting a young girl's terrible death by turning it into a giant conspiracy theory. The comment sections on posts about the case turned toxic, with fans fighting against critics and people searching for the truth arguing with people defending the victim's memory. The case stopped being only about finding justice and became a full-blown cultural war about race, fame, and power. Even the brands that had already dropped David were being harassed by Charleston's supporters, who accused them of turning their backs on an innocent man. Everyone was walking on eggshells, scared to pick a side because no one knew what was real anymore. Behind the scenes, the police were still digging quietly. They were tracing phone records, analyzing the car's GPS data, and talking to people who were close to both David and the victim. There were leaks to the news that suggested the case had become so big that it had crossed state lines, which brought in federal investigators. Some sources hinted that the reason for the long delay was a legal strategy. They didn't want to rush the charges and then lose the case later in court. But that same slow, careful process made Charleston's words hit even harder. Every single day that passed without an arrest looked like more and more proof that he was right. He'd post simple videos saying, "Still no arrest, still free," and millions of people would tune in instantly. The story wasn't just a murder case anymore. It was a reflection of how fast rumors can spread online and how easily the internet can twist reality. Charleston White turned that chaos into content that people wanted to watch. He transformed wild speculation into trending topics. And in doing so, he changed how people looked at justice in the digital age. For David, Charleston became an unexpected savior, someone who gave him a voice when everyone else was ready to cancel him forever. For his critics, Charleston was a dangerous influencer, spreading confusion and disrespect during a tragedy. Either way, he had the world's attention. Weeks turned into months, and the case kept changing and evolving. But Charleston didn't stop. Every live stream, every interview, he'd remind people of his main point. If they really had proof against David, he wouldn't be a free man. He framed the police's silence as proof of David's innocence, and the online chaos as proof that something bigger was hiding behind the scenes. Whether he was right or wrong didn't even matter anymore. What mattered was that millions of people believed him. His defense of David became a symbol of rebellion against the entire system, a digital revolution powered by controversy, strong emotion, and endless online debate. By now, Charleston White had done what nobody else could. He made people question the news headlines, doubt the evidence, and rethink what justice even means in the social media era. The police may still be working behind closed doors, but in many ways, Charleston had already won the case in the court of public opinion. He turned a terrible tragedy into a movement and made himself into the loudest voice in the room. This story isn't finished yet. The truth is still unraveling, and every day brings new questions, new theories, and new fire online. But one thing's for sure, Charleston White changed the game again. He turned his own pain into power, turned controversy into culture, and turned one man's legal case into the internet's biggest obsession.